Okay, hello everybody. Today I'm making a video about these Feiyue shoes, or Feiyue, or Feiyue, however you're supposed to say them. I already recorded a full, like 40-minute video, and then realized that it was all over the place, and the main point of the video was supposed to be about this shoe and why I don't believe that it's a barefoot shoe, and it ended up being more of me rambling about all my shoes. So instead, I cut down the number of shoes that we're going to be talking about. There's a couple more than this, but this is the primary shoes I'm going to compare. And the main point of this video is to explain why I don't think these are barefoot shoes, and kind of my reasons for why, and showing some comparisons between these shoes. These are some barefoot shoes, like real, genuine barefoot shoes. These are some basic regular shoes. We got some Vessies, and we got, these are my Vans stand-in shoes because I don't have Vans anymore. I threw them all out because they were falling apart. And then I'm going to explain why I believe this shoe would fall a little more towards these shoes, or quite a bit more actually, than these shoes. This video is not going to be me just bashing this shoe. I actually think it looks very cool, but it doesn't work for me as a barefoot shoe, and that's what I'm going to be explaining here. So we'll get on to the comparison of these shoes. Okay, so now on to these shoes. These are going to be the ones that I'm using as some pretty basic regular shoes. They're not too stiff, but they're also very stiff compared to barefoot shoes. The toe box on both of these is very small. These are just your everyday shoes. A barefoot shoe person would not consider either of these even close to barefoot shoes. But I would say these are both better options than some that are out there, like a running shoe with a very large heel, or, you know, some other shoes. For example, like a dress shoe. This would be on the extreme end of having no zero drop, being a very thick, hard heel, very small toe box. These would be a little bit better than that, so I thought it would be fair to use these as kind of the regular basic shoe stand-ins that we'll be comparing. Okay, now I'm going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and bring in the barefoot shoes. Okay, these are two expensive pair of barefoot shoes, but we also have a cheap pair, and I'm going to be using this pair to kind of show that the Feiyues, even though they're cheap, you can find shoes at very similar prices that would fit a barefoot shoe more. We'll talk about this one later, but I'm going to use these just to show off what a barefoot shoe is supposed to be. A barefoot shoe has a relatively wide toe, right? This one is a little smaller than this one. This one is, these Vivo Barefoots are fairly wide, and they just squish up very easily. The point of a barefoot or minimalist shoe is that they are minimalist. They don't take up that much on your foot. They curl up very easily. They contour with the earth in all kinds of different ways. That's kind of the point of minimalist or barefoot shoes, is to give you that ground feel and restrict your foot as little as possible. These are two very good examples. I think this is actually a really good example of a cheap one. And we'll be talking about, you know, the price comparison between this and the Feiyues in a bit. Okay, now we're going to go to the main shoes this video is talking about and go to the Feiyues. So the reason I'm making this video in the first place is because I saw quite a few videos of people claiming that this is a barefoot shoe. And I feel like it's important to know the truth, and I don't think the people making those videos are doing it maliciously or to, you know, lie to people. I think they genuinely maybe believe that this is a barefoot shoe, but I want to give my reasons why it's not a barefoot shoe. Let's just start with some of the characteristics of this shoe. We're going to start out with the toe box. If you look at it on camera, I remember when I first saw this shoe, I genuinely believed that it was wide toe box. It looks wide whenever you look at it. When you get some regular shoes compared to it, you start realizing that this is actually a lot tighter than it looks just by itself. You can put these together. These are definitely tighter, I will say. They're a little bit tighter here and a little bit tighter here, but they are relatively close in width, and that's a big no-no when it comes to barefoot shoes. I would say that these are relatively on par with the basic shoes when it comes to that toe box. They are a little bit wider, but not much. And one of the things that I've learned after making the first video, which a big failure, but the second video, I've realized that the choke point on these shoes is this upper. It is this rubber material that is relatively tough. One of the problems with that is that it ends up restricting your toes. Your toes can't, if you notice, this material doesn't stretch much. That is a big problem, and that is the reason why these feel like my toes are so crushed in them. That restriction in the toe, though, really is an issue, and it's one of the reasons why I do not believe this is a barefoot shoe. On to the second reason why I don't believe this is a barefoot shoe is flexibility. Now, you may be confused because this shoe looks like, oh man, look how flexible the shoe is. If you do right on the middle there, it flexes right in half. The problem comes when you start bending it anywhere else. The toe, it takes a lot of pressure. It may not look, it's very hard to represent in a video, but it is very hard to bend, especially this direction, which is, again, I think I said earlier in this video, but this direction matters a lot more than people think. Just think about it. When you're stepping on things, your foot often goes that way. Your foot's not always just bending that way. And the toe and in the heel of these shoes, it is just far too inflexible. It's one of the reasons why I also believe these do not represent a barefoot shoe or even a minimalist shoe. It's just too much in that sole, not allowing your foot to move the way that it's meant to. Now, if you want a shoe that has cushion, has a smaller toe box, I don't blame you. Most people do. But if you're looking for a barefoot shoe, this is just not the way to go, in my opinion. Okay, now that I've talked about the primary things about this shoe, let me just talk a little bit about the shoes. Let's compare them. So we have the Feiyues here. The first shoe that we'll have to compare. Okay, so the first shoe we're going to compare is these Vessies. I kind of have a bone to pick with these Vessies, and if I end up enjoying making this video, I may make another video, and the first one I would make is about these Vessies, but it's getting off topic. We're going to compare this one to the Feiyues first. I think before I even go into this one is definitely worse than this one. If you are going for a shoe that is flexible, this one is going to be better, but I thought it would be interesting to compare. Okay, so with these Vessies, I'm going to need to take the insole out, and then you can easily see that this is a fairly small toe box on these Vessies. Nothing to worry about if you don't care, if you want a normal pair of shoes. But if you care about barefoot shoes, then this is going to be a problem for anyone that's used to barefoot shoes. I'm going to put these in and kind of compare, see if the toe matches at all or if it's a lot smaller. We'll have to see. Okay, so this is the issue that I was having, is once I finally put these in, instead of measuring them on the bottom of the shoe, I realized if I put them inside, you can feel pretty quickly that these fit in there almost perfectly. This toe is very small, and it shouldn't fit in there, you know, if this was supposed to be a minimalist or barefoot shoe. But this fits in there easy and relatively perfectly in there, actually. I know you're going to have to take my word on that. Oops, sorry, there's lots of stuff on these. I know you're going to have to take my word on that, but, you know, that's just how it is. It looks a lot smaller if you measure it on the back, But once you actually put it in there, you know, this space that looks like there's space there, there's actually not that much space. There's rubber in between there that actually makes the space a lot smaller. So I think that's a good comparison with the Vessies. The Vessies in general are less flexible, so that's one point in the Feiyue's corner, but really, you know, all of the regular shoes are going to have slightly different flexibility. These are only marginally better, but they still do beat out the Vessies, so let's be fair. These would be closer to a barefoot shoe than a Vessie, like I would consider this a pretty basic shoe. Okay, now to compare the Feiyues with these. I'm going to consider these very close to Vans. These were a more expensive pair because they're leather and, you know, they're a different brand, but everything else about them is very close to Vans. The toe box, the drop, how thick this is, you know, everything is very similar to Vans with these shoes. So these are my stand-ins for Vans, and the reason that I picked these shoes is because I was having a comment argument with someone that created a video about these shoes being barefoot shoes or minimalist shoes, and I was trying to explain that I honestly think that something like these, a Vans type of shoe, are almost the same as these Feiyues. Sorry, I just dropped something. But these, I think, are relatively similar to the Feiyues in flexibility, in the toe box, and everything. So let's put these in now to give it a little test. Okay. Now, I haven't talked about the back, but so far, the Feiyues have been smaller towards the back than all of these shoes. These insoles have a hard time fitting in here. So that might be an issue too if you have a wider foot here. These Feiyues are pretty small in that part. Luckily, my foot's not that big there. My real issue's up here, but for you, it could be an issue that you might want to think about. So these insoles also go just basically up against the edge of this shoe. This fits in relatively well, not towards the back, but towards the front of these shoes. This insole actually fits pretty well, which is not a good not a good thing for the Feiyue if they're trying to say that they're anything like a barefoot shoe. And then we go to flexibility. The flexibility in the heel is probably the worst on these shoes, but the flexibility in the toe is not terrible. But I would say I'm going to give this a little bit more rigidity because these are worn down a little bit. So I would say these would be a little harder to do if they weren't already broken in. So I will be fair to Feiyue and say that these are a little broken in, or quite a bit broken in probably, but still, in the toe, this is just so hard to bend that even though this is broken in, I know when I first got these shoes that they were more flexible than these, at least in the toes. It seems like they really focused on flexibility in the here where your arch would be, which is important, but I think if you're going for a barefoot shoe, more flexibility is more important. So I think you could buy a pair of something like these that look similar to Vans. Take the insole out, which often these insoles are what give it quite a bit of the rise that it has, and these would actually be relatively flexible. Not the best, they're still not barefoot shoes, but they'd be about the same as these. You take the sole out of just a normal pair of Vans or something similar, and you basically have this shoe. But I'm still going to show you some barefoot shoes because I think that just showing you these normal shoes is not necessarily the best way to show why these aren't barefoot shoes. They need to also be compared to barefoot shoes. So we'll do that now. Okay, so personally, I think these are about the same, these two. They're very similar. These are probably a little more flexible and a little wider, but I think I'll just compare these all at the same time because I think it'd be redundant to do it separately. So this is really gonna drive home, I hope, why these would not be considered barefoot shoes, I don't think. So this is where we get to how flexible a barefoot shoe really needs to be. That's easy, right? There's a difference between being able to curl something up, which you could force this if you really, like, I don't know if you can see how hard I'm having to hold this together just to roll it up. It is possible, but that's going to be a lot of strain on your toes trying to force that contour. It's just a lot of rigidity. And these, I mean, these can fold any kind of direction relatively easily. These, even easier. Like these things, I swear you could almost tie these in knots. You couldn't quite, but I mean, the flexibility in the bottoms of these are pretty crazy. That's one of the big reasons why I think that these shoes bring my pain back, because I'm not getting the ground feel. My foot is not able to bend with the earth, and I've kind of gotten used to that with barefoot shoes. So these don't work that great for that. The toe box also is a lot thinner. If you compare these to these Vivos, it's not even a competition, honestly. Even these, the main thing that you'll notice with these is that these look a lot more square. It looks like they just allowed the toe to go further before they started turning over. And with these, you can tell that they cut it a little early. They start turning over to make that point a little early over here and a little bit early over here. It's not as bad on this side, but I do know that my pain in my feet was around here. Really, anytime you see that point at the end, that's not going to be a good sign for a barefoot shoe. We're going to switch shoes because I have the wrong soles. I have the left shoe. So we're going to put these in there and see first. First, I'm going to put the Vivo Barefoot because it's the biggest one. I just want to see what it does when you put these in there. Oh, wow. Okay. So, first off, in the back of this shoe, these do not want to fit. I can't even force this all the way up in there. The toe is just too tight. It's stopping around here and around here. Like I said, that's kind of where my toes get stopped too. And you can imagine that if this can't fit in there, that means that as your foot pushes forward, in these shoes, it's just getting tighter and tighter. But with this, it gives you that little bit of space so that even if you push forward, you're not cramming nearly as much. I mean, no matter what you do, if you slide forward in a shoe a little bit, it's going to probably cram your feet a little bit, but this gives you a lot more space than this would. And now, I'm going to show off the width ends. I think, so we're comparing the width ends and their insoles to these Feiyues. The reason I picked the width ends is mostly because of their price. These shoes are around $30 to $35 or something like that dollars on Amazon. And these Feiyues, these are the Chinese Feiyues, which I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, but these are the Chinese Feiyues, are around $30 to $35 as well. So these are actually really close in price. And the reason I did that is because one of the major arguments that some people were saying is that this is just so cheap that, you know, it's how you should get into barefoot shoes. This is a gateway. I think that's wrong, mostly because they're not barefoot shoes, but also because these shoes are just as cheap and they have way more similarities to any barefoot or minimalist shoe than this shoe could ever hope for. We're going to take the sole now and we are going to push it in the shoe. Okay, so again, what this shoe is doing is bottlenecking here and here. There's all this space in the front that this insole can't even reach because this is just not wide enough. I think that's the primary reason why these shoes gave me pain in the first place, is because of that crushed toe box. I really think that that's one of the main reasons I get pain, and it's really bad in these shoes. Once you put them on, if you've worn barefoot shoes, you're going to quickly realize that these are not barefoot shoes. If these are one of your first pair of barefoot shoes, I could see why you would think they're barefoot shoes, because you've never experienced a real one, but I promise to you, these are not barefoot shoes. These are barefoot shoes. You know, these are cheap barefoot shoes too. You know, these shoes are probably just as flexible, honestly, as these Vivos. These are like $35. These are $150 or something like that, right? So definitely go towards this if you're wanting to try this, but you're not sure if it's going to be your thing. Don't go for this unless you are really interested in Buddhist monks, which these Chinese Feiyus are the ones that they use. Or if you don't care about barefoot shoes, that's absolutely fine. I don't expect everyone to wear barefoot shoes. My wife doesn't wear barefoot shoes. She wears very tight shoes. She wears shoes with large heels. And that's just what she likes, and she doesn't want to do what I'm doing, and I don't blame her, but I don't think that this is a barefoot shoe. Buy it if you'd like it, if you think it looks cool, and if it's comfortable for you, do it. But I really dislike the comparisons between these and barefoot shoes, and I really thought this video was important because I was having a hard time getting across all of my points in a comment. It's a lot harder to communicate through text than it is through actually seeing what I'm talking about. Okay, so here are my conclusions on this shoe. I would say if you wear normal shoes and you just want a cool pair of martial arts shoes to wear, and you don't care about barefoot shoes or, you know, the lack of ground feel and the toe box and all the things about this shoe, I would go for it. If you are trying to get into barefoot shoes, if you really want to see what it's like to have ground feel with like literally no cushion, I mean, you get a little bit of rubber cushion, but that's about it. Large toe box, just a more freeing feeling to your foot. If that's what you're looking for, do not go for these Feiyus. You're going to be disappointed by them, especially if you've ever owned any other pair of barefoot shoes. These are going to immediately be obvious to you that they aren't. I'm mostly trying to save you money because I see that a lot of these videos are talking about these shoes as if these are a good way of saving money while also getting a barefoot shoe. But if you're spending money on a shoe that you find out later is not actually a barefoot shoe, you've ended up wasting money, and I don't want you to waste money. I was fine that these didn't end up fitting me great, and I may still wear them on occasion, but I don't think it's worth it with my knee pain and my hip pain that I get. You know, I think that's basically it. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you were able to watch the whole thing. Hopefully I was able to condense this down into a relatively quick video compared to my last. My last was about 40 minutes. Hopefully this was not too much rambling and I was able to cut this into something nice. Hopefully I'll see you again if I enjoyed making these videos. Maybe you'll see my hands again and my strange angle. See ya.